It's 11:47 p.m., and you're lying in bed, staring at the ceiling. Your phone buzzes. Email notification. You already know what it is before you open it. Your credit card payment just processed. You do the mental math for the third time tonight. Rent is in 5 days. There's that thing your car has been doing. Your friend's wedding is next month, and you still haven't bought a gift. You're not broke. You have a job. You're doing everything you're supposed to be doing, but somewhere between your chest and your throat, there's this tightness that never fully goes away. You fall asleep eventually, but not peacefully. Never peacefully. This is what financial anxiety actually feels like. It's not dramatic. It's not crying over bills you can't pay. For most people, it's this low-grade hum of stress that colors every decision you make. It's checking your account before you go out. It's saying no to things you want to say yes to. It's that split second of panic when someone suggests splitting an Uber or grabbing dinner somewhere you didn't budget for. It's living in a constant state of maybe. Now here's what most people get wrong about money. They think the number that matters is $1 million, or 6 figures, or some amount that lets you quit your job and buy things you don't need. They think money is about wealth, but that's not where the psychological shift happens. That's not where your brain stops running in survival mode and starts thinking like a different person entirely. The real number, the one that actually changes how you think, sleep, decide, and move through the world, is $5,000. Not $5,000 a month, not $5,000 in assets or investments, $5,000 in cash, saved, accessible, sitting in an account that you don't touch. $5,000 that represents absolutely nothing except the fact that you are no longer pinned against the wall by your own life. Let me be clear, $5,000 does not make you rich. It doesn't even make you comfortable. You're not buying a car with it. You're not going on some transformative vacation. You're not investing it in crypto or stocks or real estate. This money does nothing, and that's exactly why it does everything. Because what $5,000 actually buys you is not a thing. It buys you a buffer, and that buffer changes your brain. Here's what's happening in your head before you have that 5,000. Your brain is in threat detection mode. Neurologically, you are operating from a place of scarcity. When you don't have a financial cushion, your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for planning, decision-making, and long-term thinking, is constantly overruled by your amygdala, the part that screams danger. Every financial decision becomes a potential crisis. Your tire pressure light comes on and your nervous system treats it like a predator. Because in a way, it is. It's a threat to your stability. You're not thinking about your future. You're thinking about Friday. You're not strategizing. You're surviving, and survival mode makes you expensive. It makes you say yes to the overdraft fee because you needed gas. It makes you pay interest because you couldn't pay the full balance. It makes you stay at a job you hate because the fear of 2 weeks without income is unbearable. Scarcity doesn't just limit your options. It limits your intelligence. Studies show that financial stress lowers cognitive function by the equivalent of 13 IQ points. 13. That's the difference between average and significantly above average. That's the difference between clarity and fog. And it's not because you're bad with money. It's because your brain is spending all of its processing power on fear. Now here's what happens after you cross $5,000. You sleep differently. Not because your life is suddenly perfect, but because the Tier 1 disasters are covered. Your car breaks down? Annoying, but not devastating. You get sick and miss a week of work? You'll survive. Someone hits your parked car and drives off? Frustrating, but not the end of the world. The mental space that was occupied by those spinning worst-case scenarios gets freed up. And when your brain is no longer spending energy on constant vigilance, it starts spending energy on actual thinking. You stop making fear-based decisions. That's the shift. You stop choosing things because you're afraid of what happens if you don't. You start choosing things because they actually align with where you want to go. The job you hate? You can start looking for a better one without the panic of, but what if I don't find something in time? The toxic relationship you've been funding? You can leave. The opportunity that requires you to take a small risk? You can actually consider it. $5,000 is not freedom, but it's the first moment you can see what freedom might look like from where you're standing. Let's talk about why this number specifically. Why not 2,000? Why not 10? There's actual psychology and math behind this. $5,000 covers roughly 3 months of bare minimum expenses for the average person living modestly. Rent or mortgage, utilities, food, transportation, the essentials. It doesn't cover your lifestyle. It covers your survival. And that's the point. Because what you're building is not a vacation fund. You're building a psychological firewall between you and catastrophe. Behaviorally, $5,000 is also the threshold where saving stops feeling pointless. When you have $200 saved, it feels fragile. One bad week and it's gone. When you have $1,000, it feels better, but it's still not enough to change how you operate. But $5,000? $5,000 has weight. It changes your posture. You start to see yourself differently. You're no longer someone who's just getting by. You're someone who has resources. And that identity shift, that's where the compounding begins. Not financial compounding yet, psychological compounding. Because once you become the type of person who has $5,000 saved, you start making choices like that person. You don't blow $100 on something you don't need, because that person doesn't do that. You negotiate harder at work, because that person knows they have options. You think twice before financing something because that person understands the cost of debt. It's not discipline in the way people usually talk about it, it's alignment. You're acting in accordance with who you've become. And here's the part that nobody tells you. The first 5,000 is harder than the next 20. It's harder than the next 50, because you're building it with survival mode dollars. Every dollar you save before you hit that threshold is a dollar you're taking from your present self, who is already stressed and already stretched. It requires a kind of irrational optimism to believe that putting away money you could use right now will somehow pay off later, but it does. Not because of interest, not because of returns, because of what it does to your nervous system. Let's talk about what this looks like in practice. Before 5,000, you're making decisions in a very specific way. Your friend invites you to a concert. You want to go, but you check your account first. And if the ticket price feels too close to some invisible line you've drawn, you say no. You're not deciding based on whether you actually want to go. You're deciding based on fear. The same thing happens at work. You don't ask for a raise because you can't afford to be seen as difficult. You don't push back on unfair expectations because you need this job. You are always negotiating from weakness. After 5,000, the calculations change. You still check your account, but the question is different. It's not can I survive this? It's is this worth it? That's a completely different mental operation. One is about threat, the other is about value. And when you start making decisions based on value instead of fear, everything shifts. You go to the concert because it matters to you, not because you can technically afford it. You skip it because you'd rather save for something else, not because you're scared. The external behavior might look the same, but the internal experience is unrecognizable. This shows up in your career in ways that are hard to overstate. When you have no cushion, you are cornered. You take the job that pays slightly more, even if it's miserable. You tolerate bad management. You swallow small indignities, because rent is due and you have no margin for error. But when you have $5,000, you have leverage. Not enough to quit on a whim, but enough to start thinking strategically. You can take a week to interview somewhere else. You can say no to unpaid overtime. You can walk away from a job offer that doesn't feel right, because you know you have a few months to find something better. The power is not in spending the money. The power is in knowing it's there, and it changes the way you think about opportunity. Before, opportunities feel like risks. Someone offers you a freelance project that could lead to more work, but it means turning down a guaranteed shift at your current job. You say no because you can't afford the gamble. Someone suggests you take a certification course that could increase your income, but it costs money up front. You pass because you don't have the room to invest in yourself. You're so busy defending your baseline that you can't ever move beyond it. After 5,000, you can start to take intelligent risks. Not reckless ones, not betting your life savings ones, but the kind of small strategic moves that actually build momentum. You can pay for the course. You can take the freelance gig. You can invest a weekend in learning a skill that might pay off in 6 months, because your survival is handled. You've bought yourself the space to think past next week. Here's something else that changes: how you spend money. And this is counterintuitive, but after you hit 5,000, you often spend less. Not because you're more restrictive, but because you're less anxious. Before, spending is emotional. You buy things to feel better. You treat yourself because you've been stressed, and you deserve something nice. You're constantly negotiating with yourself about whether you've earned a purchase. It's exhausting. After 5,000, spending becomes boring. You buy what you need. You buy some things you want, but the compulsion fades because you're not trying to medicate stress with consumption anymore. You stop obsessing over small expenses. You're not tracking every coffee or counting every dollar at the grocery store. Not because you're careless, but because your brain has freed up bandwidth. You're thinking about the big decisions now: where you live, what you drive, how you structure your income. The $10 decisions stop mattering as much because you're focused on the $10,000 ones. It's a recalibration of attention, and it's only possible when you're not in constant crisis mode. There's also this quiet confidence that comes with it. You walk differently. You talk differently. Not in some loud performative way, but there's a subtle shift in how you show up, because you know that if something goes wrong, you'll be okay. You're not operating from desperation anymore. You're operating from choice, and people feel that. Employers feel it in salary negotiations. Clients feel it when you set boundaries. Even friends and family feel it when you stop saying yes to things out of obligation. It's not arrogance, it's self-trust. You've proven to yourself that you can delay gratification, that you can set a goal and hit it, that you can make a plan and execute it even when it's hard. That evidence changes how you see yourself, and how you see yourself changes everything. The identity shift is the real transformation. You are no longer someone who's trying to save money. You are someone who saves money. That sounds like semantics, but it's not. It's the difference between wishing you were disciplined and actually being disciplined. And once that identity is in place, the behavior becomes automatic. You don't have to convince yourself to save anymore. It's just what you do, because it's who you are. Let's be honest about what $5,000 is not. It's not retirement. It's not generational wealth. It's not even financial independence. You're still working. You still have bills. You're not buying a house with this. You're not investing in startups. This is not the finish line, but it is the starting line. It's the foundation that everything else is built on. Because you can't think about investing for retirement when you're terrified of next month. You can't build wealth when you're constantly rebuilding from zero every time something breaks. $5,000 is the moment you stop hemorrhaging. It's the moment you stop running backward and start standing still long enough to look forward. And once you're standing still, you can start walking, then running. But none of that happens without this. Here's the truth that no one wants to hear. Getting to 5,000 requires sacrifice. It requires saying no. It requires not buying things you want. It requires working extra hours, or selling things, or living below your means for longer than feels fair. It requires you to act like someone you're not yet, in the hopes of becoming that person. And that's hard, especially when you're already tired, especially when everyone around you seems to be spending freely, especially when you feel like you've already given up so much. But here's what's on the other side. A version of you that doesn't flinch when the check engine light comes on. A version of you that can think clearly because your nervous system isn't flooded with cortisol. A version of you that makes decisions based on what you want, not what you're afraid of. A version of you that sleeps through the night. $5,000 won't change your life in the way people talk about on the internet. It won't buy you a new identity or a new lifestyle, but it will change your mind, and your mind is where everything starts. Every good decision you'll ever make, every risk you'll ever take, every opportunity you'll ever seize, it all starts with a brain that has the space to think. So the first 5,000 is not about the money. It's about buying yourself back from survival mode. It's about reclaiming the mental bandwidth that's been spent on fear and redirecting it toward possibility. It's about becoming the kind of person who can build something because you're no longer spending all your energy just holding on. And once you become that person, the next 5,000 is easier, and the one after that. Not because you're making more money necessarily, but because you've changed the way you think. You've built the identity. You've proven the concept. You've crossed the threshold. The finish line is somewhere far beyond $5,000. But the starting line, the moment where everything actually begins, that's right here.